The dead do not rise. Tess felt everything. The bullet shattered bone, sent shockwaves through her skull, and left a burning hole in her brain. The last thing she heard was the dull thud of her body hitting the ground, the muffled voices of Zalari soldiers confirming her death. Then there was nothing. No afterlife. No tunnel of light. Just darkness. And then, pain. Searing, all-consuming pain dragged her back. Her mind screamed before her mouth could. Her lungs expanded in a desperate, choking gasp. Cold metal pressed against her back. White light burned into her eyes. The sterile smell of antiseptic and something acrid filled her nostrils. She was alive. Tess flinched, instinct screaming at her to move, but thick restraints bound her wrists and ankles to the table. She twisted, muscles straining against the restraints. Something beeped, a series of rapid, electronic chirps. A murmur of alien voices followed. Through the blur of light and confusion, she saw them. Tall, silver-skinned creatures with black, pupilless eyes peered down at her through a glass observation wall. Zalari. Their elongated heads tilted slightly, expressions unreadable. Cold and clinical. Panic surged through her veins like fire. "What the hell is this?" she spat, her voice raw. No response. The Zalari spoke among themselves in their guttural, clicking tongue. One tapped something on a floating control panel. The restraints tightened. Tess fought harder. "I was shot. I was." A door hissed open. A taller figure entered, clad in sleek black robes, moving with deliberate precision. High Inquisitor Willpower. Tess had seen him before, on propaganda broadcasts, leading the purges against the last human resistance cells. A scientist, a strategist, and a monster in his own right. His silver face was unreadable, but there was something calculating in his black gaze. He stopped beside her, clasping his clawed hands behind his back. "You were dead," he said simply. Tess glared. "Funny. I don't feel dead." Willpower didn't react to the sarcasm. He tilted his head slightly, eyes scanning her face like she was an equation to be solved. "You were confirmed dead at 327 standard cycle. A fatal shot to the cranium. Your body was discarded. Yet," he gestured to her. "Here you are. Functioning." Her heart pounded. "What did you do to me?" "We did nothing." A sharp chill crawled up her spine. Liar. She knew how the Zalari worked. They dissected, experimented, broke things apart to understand them. If she was here, strapped to this table, she wasn't just a prisoner. She was a specimen. Tess clenched her fists. "You're wasting your time." Willpower let out a slow breath, something close to amusement flickering across his face. "On the contrary. You are the most valuable anomaly I have encountered." A monitor flickered to life beside her, displaying her own corpse. She sucked in a sharp breath. It was her. Blood pooled around her shattered skull. Vacant eyes stared at nothing. Soldiers in Zalari armor stood over her, weapons lowered. The timestamp matched exactly what Willpower had said. She had died. Yet she was here. Tess swallowed hard, refusing to let them see her fear. "So what, you think I grew a new brain overnight?" "No," Willpower said, watching her carefully. "That is what we intend to find out." The restraints released with a sharp hiss. Tess barely had time to react before the floating drone above her jabbed something into her neck. She jerked, a cold sensation flooding her veins. Her vision blurred. Her muscles seized. Willpower's voice cut through the haze. "Do not resist. This is merely the beginning." The world faded again. She woke to the sound of distant machinery and the hum of energy fields. She was no longer strapped down, but still inside a sterile containment cell. The walls pulsed with faint blue light, energy barriers, unbreakable. A monitoring drone hovered nearby. Tess sat up, every muscle aching. Something was wrong. Her fingers brushed her temple. No wound. No scar, no pain. Nothing. It was as if the bullet had never existed. She looked at her hands. They felt different. Not stronger, just sharper. Like something in her had woken up. The cell door slid open. Willpower stepped inside, hands still clasped behind his back. "You are healing rapidly," he observed. "Your biometrics indicate an anomaly in cellular regeneration." Tess shot to her feet, tension coiling in her limbs. "You want answers?" she hissed. "So do I." Willpower ignored the hostility. "You are not like the others." "Others?" A small, predatory smile touched his lips. He gestured toward the transparent wall at the far side of the room. Tess moved cautiously, looking out. Beyond the glass, there were more humans. Men. Women. Some alive. Some not. Rows of containment units stretched into the distance, each holding a human body. Some twitched, some screamed, some lay still. All of them were broken in different ways. Test subjects. Tess's stomach twisted. "You are the first," Willpower continued, stepping beside her. "The first to return from true death." She tore her gaze away from the horror in front of her and turned to face him. "Let me out." Willpower studied her, amused. "That would be unwise." Tess's jaw tightened. "You really think you can keep me in here?" He tilted his head. "You do not yet understand what you are." A beat of silence. Then he turned and strode toward the door. "We will continue our tests soon." The door sealed shut behind him. Tess exhaled shakily, fists clenched. She looked back at the containment units. The failed experiments. She wasn't going to be one of them. Her heart pounded. Her mind raced. She wasn't dead. She wasn't normal. And she wasn't going to wait for the Zolari to find out why. She was going to escape. And when she did, she was going to burn this place to the ground. The monster in the cage. Tess pressed her palm against the energy field. A sharp jolt shot through her fingers, making her flinch. No cracks, no weaknesses. The Zolari built their prisons well. She exhaled, stepping back. No point in testing the obvious again. Her mind churned through every possible escape scenario, but nothing stuck. The cell was sterile, no vents, no loose panels, no tools. Just walls humming with quiet menace. She glanced at the observation drone floating near the ceiling. Its red sensor light pulsed rhythmically, watching. She hated being watched. Tess turned away and looked past the energy barrier, toward the rows of containment pods. Some were filled with motionless bodies, others with twitching figures. She had seen death before. The aftermath of battles. But this was different. These people weren't just prisoners. They were test subjects. Her stomach twisted. How many had they experimented on before her? How many had they discarded when they didn't get the results they wanted? A familiar voice crackled through hidden speakers. "You are restless." Tess didn't react. She didn't have to look to know Willpower was behind the glass, studying her like a puzzle waiting to be solved. "Can't imagine why," she muttered. "Your metabolism has increased. Your cells are adapting. Already, you are stronger than you were yesterday." She scoffed. "Great. Maybe I'll be strong enough to break out of here." Willpower's voice remained steady. "That would be impressive." There was something in his tone that made her skin crawl. He wanted to see her try. Tess took a slow breath, forcing herself to think. Willpower wasn't just an interrogator, he was a scientist. He didn't fear her. He was testing her. Measuring her limits. She couldn't give him what he wanted. Not yet. The drone whirred closer, scanning her face. She tensed, resisting the urge to smash it into the wall. "Not yet." "You know," she said instead, voice even, "I've seen Zolari kill entire colonies for being anomalies. So what makes me so special?" There was a pause. Then, You did not simply survive. You regenerated. Tess clenched her jaw. She had been shot. She had felt it. The searing pain, the cold emptiness swallowing her. And yet, here she was. You do not feel different? Veilcore asked. Tess hesitated. That was the problem. She did. The aches, the bruises, they faded too quickly. Her senses felt sharper. Her pulse steady, strong. She had spent years in battle, she knew her own body. And this? This wasn't normal. But she wasn't about to give Veilcore that satisfaction. She folded her arms. I feel fine. The silence that followed was too long, too calculating. Then Veilcore spoke, almost amused. We will see. The energy field flickered. The cell door slid open. Tess didn't move. No guards. No restraints. A test. She stepped forward cautiously, eyes scanning the hallway outside. Bright white walls. No shadows to hide in. No weapons. Then, movement. A Solari soldier stepped into view, armored and massive. Its exoskeletal plating gleamed under the lights, and in its clawed hands, it held a shock baton. Tessa's heartbeat slowed. Not from fear. From focus. Veilcore's voice drifted through the speakers. Resist. Adapt. The soldier lunged. Tess dodged, barely. The baton missed her ribs by an inch, humming with lethal energy. The soldier moved fast, faster than a human, but Tess was already shifting, calculating. She twisted, brought her elbow up, but the soldier was ready. The next strike clipped her side. Pain tore through her nerves. She hit the ground hard, gasping. Veilcore's voice remained calm. Your body is adapting. But not enough. Tess gritted her teeth, forcing herself up. Her ribs should have been broken. They weren't. The soldier advanced. Tessa's mind screamed for strategy. She couldn't overpower it. But she could outthink it. She feigned weakness, staggering slightly. The soldier took the bait, stepping in for the final blow. Too close. She moved. A sharp dodge. A twist. A grab. Her fingers wrapped around its wrist, using its momentum against it. The baton slipped, for just a second. She took it. And rammed it into the soldier's neck. Electricity surged through its body. The alien spasmed, then crumpled to the floor. Tess panted, staring at the baton in her hand. She had moved too fast. Not impossible fast. But faster than she ever had before. The realization sent a cold shiver through her. Veilcore's voice returned. Fascinating. Tess turned toward the speaker, eyes blazing. That was a mistake. Veilcore chuckled. A chuckle. Oh, no, he said. That was confirmation. The room filled with gas. Tess barely had time to react before her vision blurred. Her knees buckled. The baton slipped from her fingers. Damn it. Veilcore's voice was the last thing she heard. You are only just beginning. Darkness swallowed her again. She woke up in a different room. This one was smaller. No windows, no observation panels. Just a single metal door. And a chair. Veilcore sat across from her, watching. Tessa's head throbbed. She tried to move, but her limbs felt heavy. Like her body was still catching up. Veilcore steepled his fingers. Do you see it now? Tessa's breath was slow, controlled. See what? You should not have won that fight. Tess tensed. You are adapting to stress, to injury, in real time. Faster than any human before you. She forced a smirk. Sounds like bad news for you. Veilcore's black eyes gleamed. No, Tess. It is very good news. She didn't like the way he said that. You were an accident, he continued. Your survival, an anomaly. But anomalies can be. He leaned forward slightly, as if savoring the words. Replicated. Tessa's stomach dropped. You're not studying me. Her voice was low, cold. You're trying to make more of me. Veilcore smiled. And for the first time, Tess felt real fear. But not for herself. For what the Zalari might create if she didn't stop them. Her fingers curled into fists. She had to escape. Not just for herself. For every human in those containment pods. For every future experiment. For all of humanity. The breaking point. Tessa's hands curled into fists beneath the table. Veilcore sat across from her, his black eyes steady, unblinking. He was waiting. Waiting for her to break. To realize what she was. To submit. That would never happen. Tess forced herself to breathe, slow and even. Her body still felt off. Not weak, just foreign. Like her muscles had been rewired. Like she was something else. She couldn't afford to dwell on it. Veilcore's fingers drummed lightly against the table. You are struggling with the truth. Tess exhaled sharply. You don't know anything about me. Veilcore tilted his head. Don't I? The door behind him slid open. Two Zalari soldiers stepped inside, dragging a containment pod between them. The glass surface was fogged, but Tess could make out a human shape inside. Her pulse spiked. The soldiers activated the controls. The glass turned transparent. Tessa's breath caught. A child. No older than 10. Small, fragile. Tubes were connected to his arms, feeding some kind of glowing fluid into his veins. His skin was pale, his breathing slow. Too slow. Tess stood so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Let him go. Veilcore didn't react. He is an earlier subject. A failure. His body did not adapt as yours did. Tessa's jaw clenched. A failure. Like the bodies she had seen in the other containment pods. Discarded experiments. Let him go. Her voice was steel. Veilcore tapped a command into his wrist device. The liquid in the tubes changed color. The boy twitched. His breathing grew more erratic. Tess moved before she could think. Her instincts took over. Not normal instincts. She was across the room in a second. Too fast. Faster than a human. Faster than even the Zalari expected. One of the soldiers reacted, raising his shock baton. Too slow. Tess grabbed his wrist, twisted. A crack. The baton hit the ground. The second soldier lunged. Tess ducked, turned, drove her elbow into his throat. He crumpled. She ripped the cables from the containment pod. The boy gasped, shuddered. His eyelids fluttered, but he was alive. A sharp, cold pressure pressed against her temple. Veilcore stood beside her, holding a sleek, alien firearm. Tess didn't flinch. Impressive, he said calmly. Even faster than before. Tess positioned herself between him and the child. You shoot me, you lose your only successful experiment. Veilcore's expression didn't change. I could incapacitate you. Tessa's muscles tensed, ready to move, fight, kill. The lights flickered. A distant explosion rumbled through the facility. Veilcore's gaze flicked to the ceiling, brief but telling. Something was happening. Tess took her chance. She lunged. Veilcore fired, missed. Her fist connected with his ribs. The force threw him back. The gun clattered to the floor. Tess grabbed the child and ran. The facility shook. Alarms blared. Something was happening. And she was going to use it. The hallway was chaos. Zalari soldiers rushed toward the explosion source, shouting orders. Security barriers flickered, some failing. Smoke curled through the air. Tess moved, heart pounding, mind calculating. She held the boy close, his breaths weak against her shoulder. He was too light. Too fragile. She had to get him out. A corridor split in two directions. Left or right? A familiar voice stopped her. Tess. She turned. Veilcore stood at the end of the hallway, unharmed, watching her with something almost like admiration. You are remarkable. Tess tightened her grip on the child. Stay back. Veilcore stepped forward. You cannot run forever. I don't have to. Tessa's eyes flicked to the crumbling walls, the failing security fields. Someone was attacking the facility. If she could just find the exit. Veilcore sighed. You think you are free? Tessa's blood ran cold. A shape moved behind him. Not a Zalari soldier. A human. But not normal. The man's skin was gray, veins darkened with some kind of black liquid. His eyes were vacant, but his body twitched unnaturally. Tess took a slow step back. What did you do? She whispered. Veilcore's voice was calm. Too calm. You were the first success. But not the last. The mutated human twitched, then lunged. Tess dodged. Barely. Too fast. It wasn't human anymore. Not fully. It attacked again. Tess blocked, countered, but it didn't stop. It didn't feel pain. It didn't tire. Veilcore watched, hands behind his back. You see now? Tess didn't answer. She was too busy fighting for her life. The mutant grabbed her wrist. A grip like iron. Tess twisted, slammed her elbow into its throat. It staggered, but didn't fall. The boy whimpered in her arms. She had to end this. Fast. She scanned the hallway. Options. Weapons. Exits. Then she saw it. A half-collapsed security field flickering at the far end. Tess gritted her teeth. She let the mutant lunge again. This time, she didn't dodge. She sidestepped at the last second, and shoved it straight into the energy field. Electricity surged. The creature convulsed. Twitched. Collapsed. Smoke curled from its body. Tess didn't wait. She turned, and ran. Veilcore didn't stop her. But his voice followed. You will return. Tess didn't look back. She didn't stop. She sprinted toward freedom. Toward the unknown. But one thought burned in her mind. Veilcore wasn't finished. And neither was she. The night sky above was vast and cold, speckled with distant stars. Tess crouched behind the remains of a collapsed wall, her breath shallow. The boy clung to her, his small frame trembling against her side. The Zalari facility was in ruins behind them, smoke curling toward the sky. The attack, whoever had launched it, had given them an opening. She had used it. But now, survival was the only thing that mattered. She scanned the desolate wasteland. They were still on Zalari-occupied ground, deep in hostile territory. No cover, no backup, no way to call for help. Just her, a half-conscious child, and whatever changes the Zalari had forced into her body. The boy stirred weakly. His eyes, glassy with exhaustion, met hers. Where are we? Safe for now, she whispered. But we need to move. She had no map, no supplies, only instincts. And those instincts screamed danger was close. A soft hum broke the silence. Tessa's pulse spiked. She pulled the boy closer, eyes darting across the open land. The hum grew louder, a low, mechanical vibration. Drones. Her jaw clenched. They were already searching. She shifted her weight, preparing to run, but the ground erupted behind her. A plasma bolt struck the ruined wall, sending shards of debris into the air. Tess moved. She grabbed the boy and bolted. Her feet barely touched the ground as she sprinted, weaving through the wreckage. The drones adjusted course, their lights sweeping across the dark landscape. Another shot sizzled past her head. Too close. Her mind raced. She couldn't outrun them forever. If she didn't find cover, they'd. A figure emerged from the darkness ahead. Tess skidded to a stop, heart hammering. Human. Armed. He raised a rifle, not at her, but at the sky. A precise shot took out one of the drones. Sparks rained down as the machine spiraled into the ground. Move, he barked. Tess didn't hesitate. The stranger led her through the ruins, navigating the crumbling terrain like he knew it by heart. Another drone whined overhead. He shot it down without breaking stride. They reached a collapsed tunnel, its entrance barely visible beneath debris. The man ducked inside, gesturing for Tess to follow. She hesitated for only a second before slipping in after him, pulling the boy close. The tunnel stretched into darkness. The man activated a dim blue light on his wrist, revealing a hidden underground passage. They ran for several minutes before he finally slowed, listening for pursuit. When nothing came, he exhaled and turned to face her. Tess took a step back, still gripping the boy protectively. "Who are you?" The man lowered his weapon slightly. "You don't recognize me?" Tess frowned. There was something familiar about his face. Sharp features, dark eyes, a scar running down his cheek. A memory flickered, her unit. The Resistance. "Reyes," she breathed. A small smirk crossed his face. "So you do remember." Tess's mind reeled. Reyes had been one of the Resistance's best operatives before the Zalari took him. She had thought him dead. "How are you here?" she demanded. "What happened?" Reyes's expression darkened. "Same as you, I'd guess." Her stomach clenched. "They experimented on you." Reyes's jaw tightened. He didn't confirm or deny it. But the way he moved, the way he had taken out the drones, it was clear. He wasn't the same as before. "How many of us?" Tess asked. Reyes hesitated. "Too many." Tess's hands curled into fists. The Zalari weren't just testing on humans. They were building something. Creating something. The boy whimpered against her side, snapping her attention back. "He needs medical help," Tess said. "Is there somewhere?" Reyes nodded. "We have a base. A real one." Tess's breath caught. "The Resistance?" His expression turned grim. "What's left of it?" He turned and led them deeper into the tunnels. Tess followed, heart pounding. If there were still survivors, if there was still a fight to be fought, she wasn't done. They walked for nearly an hour. The air grew damp, the walls narrowing. Then, finally, a metal door loomed ahead. Reyes knocked in a precise rhythm. A pause. Then a click. The door slid open. Inside, the underground base hummed with quiet activity. Humans, real, living humans, moved between makeshift stations. Engineers worked on salvaged Zalari tech. Medics tended to wounded fighters. This was a war camp. A last stand. A woman in a battered uniform approached. Her sharp gaze landed on Tess. "So you're the one who caused that mess up top," she said. Tess straightened. "I didn't plan it, but I took advantage." The woman studied her, then glanced at Reyes. "She clear?" Reyes nodded. The woman sighed. "I'm Captain Delara. Welcome to what's left of the Resistance." Tess glanced around. There weren't many of them. 50, maybe 60 fighters at best. But they were still here. She looked at Reyes. "What's the plan?" He crossed his arms. "We fight. But we need intel. You've been inside, Tess. You've seen what they're doing." She swallowed hard. "They're making an army." Silence settled over them. "How soon?" Delara asked. Tess exhaled. "They've already started." Delara cursed under her breath. Reyes met Tess's gaze. "Then we don't have much time." Tess knew what he meant. The Zalari weren't done. Veilcore wasn't done. And if they didn't stop them now, no one would. She nodded once. She was ready. The last gambit. The underground base was eerily quiet. Every survivor knew what was at stake. They had one chance. One final strike. Tess stood at the center of the war room, a crude holographic map flickering before her. The Zalari stronghold was highlighted in red, a fortress of metal and alien technology. Inside, Veilcore was still working. Still creating monsters. She clenched her fists. No more. Reyes and Captain Delara stood beside her. The Resistance's forces were small, barely enough for a direct assault. But that wasn't the plan. This isn't a siege, Reyes said. We don't have the numbers for that. Tess nodded. Then we strike the heart. Delara crossed her arms. Meaning? Tess met her gaze. Veilcore. We take him out, destroy his lab. If we cut off the head, the body dies with it. Delara exhaled. You're suggesting we infiltrate the most secure Zalari facility on this continent and assassinate one of their top scientists? Yes. Silence. Then, Reyes grinned. Sounds like a good plan. Delara sighed. You people are insane. But she didn't argue. Because it was their only chance. The mission begins. The night was moonless, perfect for an infiltration. Tess, Reyes, and a hand-picked team moved through the wasteland, silent shadows in the darkness. The facility loomed ahead, tall, angular, humming with power. Security was tight, but they had planned for that. A controlled explosion rocked the far side of the complex. A diversion. The Zalari responded immediately, troops mobilizing toward the false threat. Tess and her team slipped in through a maintenance tunnel. The inside was sterile, metallic, suffocating. The air hummed with an unnatural energy. This was where humanity was being rewritten. A chill ran down her spine. Not anymore. They moved fast, taking out patrols with silenced weapons. Reyes led the way, his enhanced reflexes making him a blur in the dim corridors. Then they reached it, Veilcore's lab. The doors slid open with a hiss. Inside, Veilcore was waiting. The final confrontation. The Zalari scientist stood in the center of the chamber, his elongated face twisted in something close to amusement. He wasn't surprised. I knew you would return, Subject 7, he said, his voice smooth, mocking. You were my most promising creation. Tess raised her weapon. I'm not your creation. Veilcore tilted his head. Then why are you still alive? Behind him, rows of pods lined the walls. More humans. More experiments. Some still alive. Some weren't. Rage burned in Tess's chest. You're a monster, she spat. Veilcore sighed. No. I am a scientist. And you, my dear, are proof of my success. Tess pulled the trigger. The bullet never reached him. A shimmering shield deflected the shot. The Zalari's lips curled. Did you really think it would be that easy? The room exploded into chaos. Automated turrets sprang to life. Drones swung from the ceiling. And Veilcore moved. Not like a scientist. Like a predator. He was fast, faster than any Zalari Tess had faced. She barely dodged as he struck, his elongated claws tearing through the air. Reyes fired, but the scientist blurred, dodging with unnatural grace. He had enhanced himself. Tess gritted her teeth. So had she. She attacked. Their movements were a blur, enhanced strength and speed clashing in a deadly dance. Veilcore was powerful, but Tess had something he didn't. Determination. She feinted left, then struck low, a brutal hit to his side. He staggered. Reyes took the shot. The bullet found its mark. Veilcore stumbled, crimson seeping from the wound. He looked at Tess, something almost like fascination in his alien eyes. You, truly are remarkable, he whispered. Tess didn't hesitate. She finished it. Veilcore fell, his body collapsing in a lifeless heap. The lab's alarms screamed. The facility was failing. Tess turned to the pods. "We're getting them out." Reyes nodded. "Then we blow this place to hell." The end of the experiment. They worked fast, freeing the survivors. Some could walk, others had to be carried. The team planted explosives along the core of the facility. As they reached the exit, the Zalari forces finally caught on. Tess didn't stop. She grabbed the detonator, looked back one last time, and pressed the button. The ground shook. Flames erupted. The Zalari's grand experiment burned to nothing. Epilogue. The dawn was breaking as they reached the resistance base. Survivors were carried inside, wounds treated, plans whispered for the future. Tess stood at the entrance, watching the horizon. Reyes joined her. "You did it." She shook her head. "We did it." He smirked. "So what now?" Tess took a deep breath. The Zalari weren't gone. The war wasn't over. But this was a victory. She turned to him, determination burning in her eyes. "Now, we fight."